Hey everybody, hope you're doing well out there. This is what I hope is a word of encouragement. I know for many of us this week has been long and difficult, and for some of us the weeks tend to be running together. So I hope these words bring you some peace and some hope during this time. I'm going to begin by reading from John chapter 10. Very truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to them, very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved, and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. This week's lectionary readings are filled with talk of sheep. From Psalm 27 to this passage to others, it's just kind of sheep and shepherds, and when you read them all back to back, they actually end up sounding kind of funny. And the reason they sound funny, at least to my ears, is because we Christians talk about sheep and shepherds a lot. We sing songs about sheep and shepherds. We talk about ourselves being sheep, about God or Jesus being the good shepherd and that sort of thing. But it's funny because most of us know nothing about sheep. We don't raise sheep. Many of us hardly ever even see sheep. We wouldn't know what to do with a sheep if we had one. And so all of these passages throughout the Bible about shepherds and sheep, and the metaphor, it just has very little meaning for us because that's not our world. I don't live in a world where sheep are a part of my everyday life, where I hire a shepherd to take care of my sheep, where I am a shepherd. And so that's okay. A lot of metaphors in the Bible are metaphors for that time. They made sense to the people who would have heard these things. Everyone listening to Jesus' day would have known sheep, been around sheep, knew people who were raising sheep, perhaps raised sheep themselves, and so these words might mean something to them. And it's funny also because the words don't make sense to me because I'm not around sheep. I know nothing about sheep. But even the people who heard them, who were around sheep all the time, the passage says they didn't get it. They couldn't figure out this metaphor about sheep and shepherds. But what makes me really laugh about this passage, what makes it really humorous for me, is as Jesus goes along, he's explaining about sheep, and you almost wish he would use a modern metaphor, right? If Jesus was here today, he wouldn't use these metaphors. He'd use something we'd understand. I'm not saying he would call himself, I am the iPhone 11. But he would use metaphors that make sense in our world. He was using a metaphor to make sense in their world. But when they don't understand it, he decides to explain it to them. But what he says isn't, I am the shepherd. What he says is, I am the gate. What? They were around sheep. They were around shepherds. It still didn't make sense to them. But that's not even what he says he is. He says, I am the gate. Well, if they don't get the sheep and the sheep references, and of course we don't get the sheep and the sheep references, how are we supposed to get that Jesus is a gate? This is not something we have adopted. Like, I hear people talk about Jesus as the good shepherd often. I've heard people refer to themselves as sheep. I have never, in all of my years, and I have been in a lot of church services, I've never once heard anyone pray to our gate. Thank you for being our gate. I've never heard it. And so Jesus uses this metaphor of sheep and shepherds. The disciples don't get it. We probably don't get it. He says, I am the gate. I know I don't get that. But it's all okay. It's all okay because what he says at the end is what sums it up, and it is what matters, and it is what makes sense of the whole thing. Jesus says this. At the very end of the passage, the last thing, he says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. But I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. You see, the disciples may not have understood the metaphor about sheep and shepherds and pens and especially gates. But this part can make sense to all of us. The thief, whoever that is all about what the sheep can do for them. Right? I'm here to steal the sheep, to either eat the sheep or to have the sheep or to sell the sheep or whatever. But it's about what the sheep can do for me. The thief is here to use the sheep. And if they get destroyed in the process, who cares, right? So if the thief comes and steals 4 sheep and there's still 8 in there, the thief doesn't worry about shutting the gate. Like, oh, I got to protect those sheep. No, if some of the sheep are lost or maimed or even destroyed in the process, the thief doesn't care. Because the thief only cares about themselves. And the sheep are just something to use. But Jesus says, at the end of this whole passage, but I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. Even a shepherd is kind of using the sheep, right? The shepherd may love the sheep and may take care of the sheep and make sure they have good pastures and good land and protect them from a wolf or whatever. But even the shepherd is either getting paid, like this is my job, or plans to eat the sheep or use the wool from the sheep. The shepherd is kinder and gentler, but still the sheep are for his use in some way. But that's not what Jesus says. Jesus says, I came that the sheep might have life and have it in abundance. No one thinks about the sheep having abundant life. They're sheep. Their job is to provide for us. But that's not how Jesus sees things. Jesus doesn't view people as things to be used, as products to be sold, as people as a means to an end. All people are to be respected and loved and taken care of and be given life and life in abundance. You see, whatever we understand or don't understand about these metaphors and lots of others that Jesus uses that sometimes, to be honest, don't make sense to me. The one thing Jesus consistently shows is that he is about moving toward abundance, towards life, towards the good of the sheep. The metaphor changes, and I think that's an attempt to try to help people get it. There's no perfect metaphor, but the impetus behind the metaphor is the same. It's abundance. It's compassion. It's life. It's caring. Every sheep and shepherd story show us that. Who cares about sheep? unless you're going to use them. But Jesus cares about the sheep, even though he doesn't see them as an end for himself. It's quite remarkable. What a different world we would live in if we really viewed people that way. Not as an ends, not as they provide this thing for me, or there's this thing I need and there's these people who can give it to me, whether that's something physical, something monetary, something emotional. They just provide this thing for me and they're here for my use, and when they're not useful to me anymore, I can kind of kick them to the curb. How differently would we view elderly people? Right? Someone who is no longer able to work. Someone who, in many ways, has to be helped in life or taken care of. The attitude of the thief is they're of no use to me anymore. They're not providing anything. There's nothing there I can take and use for me. That's not the attitude of Jesus. He's still looking to give them life and life in abundance. When we see the guy shoveling the dirt to build the new road, is that just a person who's doing this thing we want done so we can drive on this smooth, nice road, or is that someone who deserves life and deserves it in abundance? How do we view the foreigner, the immigrant, our enemy? Are they something to be used or controlled, or are they someone who deserves life and deserves it in abundance? You see, one of the reasons I don't think the disciples could understand these metaphors very well was because the metaphors don't make sense. Oh, I think they understood about sheep. They understood about shepherds. But this total giving yourself away to things, that made no sense. At some point, you're doing things for you. But that's not how Jesus viewed people. Listen to these words from Frederick Buechner. God is the cosmic shepherd who gets more of a kick out of that one lost sheep once he finds it again than out of the 99 who had the good sense not to get lost in the first place. God is the eccentric host who, when the country club crowd all turned out to have other things more important to do than come live it up with him, goes out into the skid rows and soup kitchens and charity wards and brings home a freak show. The man with no legs who sells shoelaces on the corner. The old woman in the moth-eaten fur coat who makes her daily rounds of the garbage cans. The old wino with his pint in a brown paper bag. The pusher, the whore, the village idiot who stands at the blinker light waving his hands as the cars go by. They are seated at the damask-laid table in the great hall. The candles are all lit, and the champagne glasses are filled. At a sign from the host, the musicians in the gallery strike up Amazing Grace. May we find within ourselves the beauty of life in abundance. But may we also find in ourselves the beauty of helping others find life in abundance. And may the world be changed into a place where we come to believe that all people deserve that abundant life.